My name is Del Warren, Vice President of the Kegel Training Center, and we're here today with Kelly Kulik and Liz Johnson to talk about three of the Kegel Navigation Series patterns. I know we get a lot of questions about the patterns at Kegel as people bowl on them. Things like where do you play the particular pattern? What balls do I use? What are the strategies? So we've chosen three patterns, one in the Sports Series and two in the Challenge Series to talk about. I've asked the two ladies to give their opinion, generally speaking, on how to play short, medium, and long, and I think that'll give everyone some great tips on at least to get in the right part of the lane and to understand why the pattern plays like it does. So for this particular subject matter, we're going to really focus on short first, which is the Boardwalk pattern. It's 24-35, which the first two numbers in that series indicates that this pattern is 2.4 to 1 ratio, which is a very, very difficult ratio. It's almost a flat pattern. And the last two numbers, 35, represents the pattern length, 35 feet. And as we talked about previously, we use a system, PL minus 31, pattern length minus 31, to indicate where we want the ball at the end of the pattern or the exit point. So in this case, 35 minus 31 is 4. Certainly, we all know that most short patterns play out. This pattern is no exception. But some of the key things to look for is when you do get outside of 5 is, number one, make sure that you slide far enough to the right. Normally, there's about 7 boards difference between where you slide and where you lay the ball down. So if you were going to play straight up, let's say the 4 board, you would want to slide somewhere around 11, 12. And typically on a short pattern, the players that traditionally hit short consistently are the players that throw a little bit harder, a little bit straighter, and can stay out a little bit longer. So one of the things that I look for on a short pattern as well is what are the first 2 boards like? Are they on? Is there some friction? Can you get it to the edge and get it back? If that's the case, you're going to want to move your focal point even a little bit further to the right and play the bump. If it so happens you run into an installation or a particular lane that you actually have hang at 2-3, then it can get a little different. It can get a little tougher. So in those cases, I like to move your focal point in a little bit, play a little bit tighter line, and certainly use bowling balls that are going to just roll and really not make a big move, and use the angle that you're playing in order to hit the pocket. Kelly, tell us a little bit about when you go about playing a short pattern like Boardwalk in a sports situation. What are some of the tactics that you use, and what would be a bowling ball that you use with a layout?
Well, like you said, a shorter pattern would make me want to play closer to the gutter, to the channel. Angle's very small. I started off with a ball that's very controllable, so within our ebonite line, most likely would be a curve ball, probably a 4.5-inch pin, CG kicked out with a big hole, so in the hole at the end of the pattern, it sees it tends to slow it down and make it pick up into a roll sooner. Probably some aggressive surface, at least 1,000. And again, I would try to play as close to the channel as possible. Now me, even though my rev rate's a little bit higher and a little bit stronger hand, I could probably swing the ball through 7 or 8 of the arrows and maybe get it to 2-3 and just let it check up and roll off of it. But if I can make my hand a little bit softer and calmer, I will, and try to stay on top of it as long as I can. For me on the short patterns, typically one of the things that help me is by looking closer. Not actually looking very far at the arrows, but maybe just looking a few feet out past the foul line. And often enough, maybe even actually in the gutter, so I'm not afraid to walk away from it. But again, something very controllable, a lot of surface, hole down or hole on the axis line just to make it really smooth, and really just try to get the ball to pick up and roll so it's in over and it hits the pocket.
Great. And as everybody knows, Kelly has a lot more hand than most of the girls, and she's able to adapt her game a little bit. You normally pick your speed up and maybe cut your hand down a little bit?
I do. For me, what's key again is also a little less grip pressure. It allows the thumb to exit even cleaner and my fingers just to kind of get the back of it, whereas normally I'm around it. So again, if I can just reduce that pressure and be a little bit softer with my hand, the ball will have a tendency not to overreact, but just be smoother in that transition.
Great. Well, Liz, I know this is kind of in your wheelhouse. I've seen you bowl really well on some short patterns, and I know you like to play a little straighter line. Tell us, if I was going to learn how to play a short pattern and I wanted to come and see one of the best players in the world, you would be right at the top of the list. So tell us a little bit about how you play kind of your A game on short.
Normally, I'll probably pick something like a burst or even like a game on. A high pin, probably like 4 or 5 inch pin. And it would probably start out somewhere with a weight hole. Usually on the fresh, short pattern, there's so much friction. You kind of want to cut that angle down a little bit. And so it usually a fairly big weight hole. And if I'm looking right around anywhere between like 3, 4, 5, probably my feet will probably be right around 9, 10, and slide like 11, 12. And just right up the back of it. Sometimes depending how the front part of the lane goes, I may change my hand position a little bit to control the back end a little bit. But usually balls, pin highs, just stuff that gets through the front fairly clean and can go up the back of it.
So do you then, I know we were talking about what ball speed you like to keep it at normally, where you see the best reaction, and are you able then to actually make your ball speed go up a little bit?
Yeah, actually if when I concentrate more, physically using more of my legs, I'm able to get a little more ball speed, to be a little more controllable ball speed. Anything on this pattern, maybe right around 19 miles an hour. And try not to loft as much, but just keep, my footwork, slow, and just use my legs a little bit more instead of trying to use my upper body as much.
That's a great tip for somebody that can certainly knock down the pins even. Certainly you compete very high level even with the men. I think you're a threat no matter who's out on the lane. So I personally like a curveball 5-inch pin with a medium hole, 1,000 or even 500 surface, and I really like to get my ball speed up. And that's kind of, my game's very similar to yours, Liz, kind of up the boards. And I really just, I try to take my hand completely out of it and make my swing even longer and smoother and really not try to hook the ball. So, but probably I think most people, generally speaking, know that they have to play out a little bit straighter. The PBA Tour is certainly featured, and a lot of the majors have featured a shorter pattern from time to time. But what do we really do when the lane transitions? We try to stay out on it longer, or do we move in and bank the gutter more? Kelly, what do you do? What's your next move when you got to bowl a lot of games on the short? What happens?
Because of my rev rate, I'm not able to stay on top of it very long. So I know I have to move inward. I have to open up my angles through the front portion of the lane. But the good news is I know that most often enough the 1-2 is hooked. It hooks off the lane. So it's almost like there's this big wall on the gutter, and I know my ball is just going to bounce right off of it. So it makes my swing even freer and looser. But again, I open up my angles longer. I move further left with my feet, keep my eyes further right so I still get that angle through the front part of the lane, and just let the lane suck the ball back in.
You tend to go with polish at that point, or?
I will try to tend to use a stronger ball, still with maybe a lighter surface instead of 1,000, maybe 2,000. Polish, I think, just enhances the end of the pattern, and it proves to be more friction. So it really wants to go sideways, and I don't want to see the ball go sideways. So maybe I'll use 2,000, possibly even 4,000, just to get it very smooth at the end of the pattern.
So then you even go with a stronger ball.
I do.
So you go stronger pin, and even something that may even pick up more?
I will. I'll still maybe use a 4.5-inch pin down, or I'll tend to go to a stronger ball with a pin up. Also, CG kick that with a hole, just so when it sees it, it's smoother off of it, until I feel like I'm forced to use something that's maybe a little more linear.
Interesting. Is that what you do, Liz?
Well, sometimes it depends depends also who you're crossing with, whether, like, when you see the area of like 1, 2, 3 out there, if there's less friction, I may go to a stronger ball and move to that, to where there's a little bit of skid and still stay on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I may get a little left of that, maybe right in the 5, 6 area, and maybe stay with a ball that I started with, or maybe go to something a little bit weaker.
I know I like to try to stay out as long as I can, and we find that when you can do that, what I like to do is then maybe go to something like a hard ball with a pin a little bit up more, maybe instead of a 5-inch pin, go to a 5.5. But then what I do is actually raise my ball speed even more, and then just fire it and try to play in the drive. But generally speaking, the longer I can stay out to the right past 5, the less I'm getting involved into the traffic and where everybody else is playing. So I know that the longer we can stay out, it seems like the higher you're going to score, the more consistent you're going to score, especially going pair to pair. And as we've learned about different centers and topography, especially when you're getting out close to that gutter, you see some pretty big differences from pair to pair in different bowling centers. So again, audience, as you can see, we have 3 different players talking about 3 different strategies here, and all 3 of us tend to look at the lane a little bit differently. So, but generally speaking, is you got to monitor, is 1-2 dry, what the scoring pace is, and when you do move in, do you find push or do you find hook? And those are the general rules when you're talking about this particular pattern. Boardwalk is 2.4 to 1, so it is fairly flat, and it can play a little bit easier depending upon the surface that you're on, or I've actually seen it in some centers play quite difficult. So I hope you enjoy some of these tips. This will really help you maximize your skills and your game, and actually enjoy playing the short pattern a little bit more.